Thank you very much. So I just wanted to give you a resource. There's an excellent page on the internet by the name of nutritionfacts.org. Okay? And the problem of today's world is that there's too much fake news, and there's all kinds of ideas that may not necessarily be true. I'm on, I believe. I'm on? Yeah? And let me show you an example of what this website has. This is one video about eggs. If you can put the audio on the video.
As I noted last year, the Harvard Nurses' Health Study found that the daily consumption of the amount of cholesterol found in just a single egg appeared to cut a woman's life short as much as smoking 25,000 cigarettes, 5 cigarettes a day for 15 years. Following up on that research, a study in the journal Atherosclerosis found that just 3 eggs or more a week was associated with a significant increase in artery clogging plaque buildup in people's carotid arteries going to their brain, a strong predictor of stroke, heart attack, and death. In fact, they found a similar exponential increase in arterial plaque buildup for smokers and egg eaters. Those that ate the most eggs had as much as 2/3 the risk of those that smoked the most, the equivalent of a pack-a-day habit for 40 years or more. This did not go over easy with the egg industry, as revealed in a series of internal memos about this group of researchers retrieved through the Freedom of Information Act. The American Egg Board discussed the wisdom of making industry responses when the public knows there's a vested interest. So, the executive director of the Egg Board's Egg Nutrition Center proposed they contact some of our friends in the scientific community to have an objective, external source author the response. If you do so, he wrote to one of their friends at Yale, we'll certainly compensate you. But the prominent Yale physician refused to participate in an overly antagonistic letter given his friendship with one of the co-authors of the review. If you can't find someone with credentials to counter the science, why not just make one up? How's this for a bizarre twist? An email was circulated to discredit the researchers by a doctor, MD, PhD, why not throw in an MBA while you're at it, who claimed the prestigious researchers didn't know a thing about nutrition. Only when the principal investigator of the egg study replied to the allegations did we learn that the doctor doesn't exist. His email was hacked. The poor guy was like, I was on vacation, I don't know what you're talking about. And apparently the culprit was never found.
Very interesting, isn't it? So yeah, very good source of information, highly recommended. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about mental health. So I've been involved in a mental health program, one of the most successful mental health programs in the world. And this is some of our latest data. This is a nice big sample, more than 1,000 people. And we're showing here how people with depression, very high levels of depression, by the end of only 10 days, their depression comes down to normal levels. And the same story happens with anxiety, from nice and high anxiety to no anxiety. What are we doing? That's what we're going to be learning today. Is there any hope for mental health? And mental health problems are so common that you can basically classify people into 2 groups. Those that have a mental health problem and those that know somebody that has a mental health problem. Because this is so common among our midst. In fact, when you are depressed, when you are suffering with anxiety, do you become more productive? No. Not necessarily. And that's what this study is showing. that people that have mental health problems, they are more likely to lose money as you go to the doctor, as treatment, and sometimes inability to perform in your job. You know, your mind, your concentration, it's affected when you are facing mental health problems. One of the best review articles on the subject, published in one of the top journals in the world, journal Nature, they were documenting how you are more likely to be cured from cancer than from depression, wrote the authors. And they talk about how after 5 decades of making antidepressive medication, still only a handful of people feel they are healed by taking these medications. There must be something more, isn't it? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And statistics says that 1 out of 4 women will experience depression at some period of their lives. Among females tend to be higher the numbers due to the fact of menopause and hormone system. While among males, 1 out of 8 males will suffer depression at some period of their lives. And the way that we diagnose depression, we use a guideline of a book called the DSM-5. And in that book, the definition of depression is there. So if somebody has 5 or more out of the 9 symptoms I'm going to show you in a minute, that's how you diagnose depression. So let's just go quickly through some of those symptoms. You have deep sadness. The person manifests this if it's a male or it's a female. Among females, they tell me, "Doctor, I don't know why am I crying. I shouldn't be even crying for this, but this tiny little thing made me cry." So crying spontaneously many times is a way that females represent this symptom. Among males, the way that they describe the symptom is saying, "You know what, doctor? I feel like there's something inside of me that is not okay. I cannot put my finger what it is, but I just know that something is not right." Next symptom, apathy. The person wakes up in the morning and they don't see the day ahead of them with enthusiasm. In fact, some people think that this is normal. This is not normal. You should be, excited for the day that you are about to face. Next one, agitation. The person loses its patience very easy. Or another symptom that would qualify for this also is something that is called psychomotor retardation, which basically means that you are moving or speaking too slowly, okay? And in fact, many times they don't even realize they're doing that. Not unless somebody is recording them on the cell phone and then they show them the video. They're like, "Is that me? Why am I moving so slow?" They don't even realize that they are doing it. Next one, problems with their sleep. Patient wakes up at 2 or 3 a.m. and what happened? They cannot go back to sleep. And this has to do with the chemistry of their brain. See, somebody that is facing things with depression, their neurochemistry is affected. Especially important neurochemicals like serotonin are too low. And serotonin in the night becomes melatonin. So if the brain has too little serotonin, it's going to have too little melatonin, and that's going to disturb the sleeping patterns. The person is going to have problems starting their sleep or maintaining the sleep. And in fact, there's a correlation. The more severe the depression, the earlier that they wake up in the middle of the night. That's one possible extreme problem, too little sleep. But also the opposite can also be true, too much sleep. People that are sleeping 14, 16 hours in a day. In fact, that's the type of patient that comes to us. And you know, after sleeping 16 hours, many patients tell us, you know what, doctor, I wish I could sleep a little bit more. I don't feel I'm sleeping enough, you know. And both extremes start to improve when you start dealing with the root cause of the depression, then reversal takes place. Next one, changes in their weight or appetite. Patient comes to eat, and they serve them the food. They take 2, 3 spoonfuls, and they say, no, I'm not hungry anymore, and they don't want to eat. See, this type of patient is going to be a difficult to treat patient because, think about it, what I eat becomes the neurochemistry of my brain. So if I'm not eating the right nutrition, my brain cannot make the right neurochemistry. This type of patient, not even the medication for depression works on them because you're not putting the building blocks that you need for good mental health. So that's one extreme. The other extreme of this point is the one that is using food as self-medicating type of procedure. What type of foods? Chocolate, white flour, sugar. These types of foods temporarily make the person feel better, but it becomes a yo-yo. They feel better, then they crash, then they need another dose, and they go like that throughout their day. And at the end of the day, all those calories accumulate, and the person ends up gaining weight. Next one, lack of concentration. The person has a hard time focusing at what they are trying to do. Next one, feelings of worthlessness. The patient feels that they're not important, that sometimes it would be even better if they're not there, which is a complete lie. It's not true. And that's secondary also to that neurochemistry deficiency. And then morbid thoughts. The patient is thinking all the time about disease. The patient is thinking about harming themselves. The patient is thinking about harming others. So you can see some of this in society today. If you see some of the designs, especially that young people like to have, it's all these skulls and so forth. Those are symbols of death. That is not something normal. Those are morbid thoughts. And finally, fatigue. The patient tells me, you know what? The reason why I came to see you is because I have this tiredness that it just doesn't go away with nothing. I don't know what's wrong with me. And as you start exploring the person, sure enough, they have those 5 or more symptoms present, and fatigue happens to be just one of those symptoms present. Now, if the person doesn't have the full 5, but they have between 2 to 4, that is what we call either a minor depression or a subsyndromatic depression. Everything is not really bad, but everything is not really well. is somewhere there in between that the person is operating. So let me tell you the story. This is Christy. Christy started hanging around the wrong types of friends, and then she started to get involved with drugs and alcohol, and very soon her mental health started spiraling down, getting worse and worse and worse. Her parents knew about our program in California, so they decided to send her to our program. And when she got there, Christy didn't want it to be there. So what she did, she tried to escape, and we got her. She tried a second time, and we got her. She tried a third time, and we got her. She tried a fourth time, and we got her. So we had a staff meeting, and we said, you know what, we need to do something about this. This is getting a little bit out of hand. So we decided that somebody was going to sleep in the door outside her room. So in case she tried to escape, in the middle of the night, she would, stumble there, and the person would be able to catch her there immediately without causing much problem. And something happened to her. As she saw that we really care about her and we really wanted to help her, instead of being rebel against the program, she started cooperating with the program and started going with the walks and started working with her thinking and all the different interventions that we do there. And came to the point that by the time that she finished the program, her depression was on her way out. And today, Christy is a very successful person. She works as a full-time nurse, and she is a successful mother, and in fact uses some of her time to volunteer and help many others. In fact, her story is public. You can actually find it online. Just look for it, Christy Christopher, by the word of their testimony. It's called her story that she was sharing here for a radio station here in Australia. So the problem with depression is that depression has a negative effect in many other organs. Things like osteoporosis, things like problems with immunity, things like addictive behaviors are more likely to increase when depression is on board, and even at the level of controlling your emotions. So the problem with depression is that it not only affects at the level of the mind, but multiple organs in the body start to react in a negative way when depression is on board. There's this citation that it has a lot of wisdom. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of what? Of mental depression. Grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. Excellent book, The Ministry of Healing, where this comes from. Let me tell you a second story. Mikala, she was a beautiful girl that sadly at the age of 13, she was sexually abused. And depression started creeping in her life. And the way that she started dealing with her depression is that she started forming boyfriend-girlfriend relationships that would go really fast, very intimate, very fast, and then the boyfriend would dump her off, and then she would find another boyfriend and start the cycle over and over again. Question, did that help with her mental health? No, that actually made her mental health much worse. To the point that when she went to see a health professional, in order to control her severe depression, they had to put her not only on 1, but 2, but 3, but 4 medications in order to control her very severe depression. So very soon she was back again, to be able to function somehow. And she saw that the local pharmacy was looking for some workers, so she went ahead and applied and got a job there at the pharmacy. And as soon as she started working there, she caught the eye of the manager of the pharmacy. So very soon, they started to establish a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. This one seemed a little bit different than the other ones. This one at least, seemed a little bit more stable and economically better off and so forth. And when he proposed to her to go and spend a long weekend in Mexico, she thought that she was in the top of the world. So when they get down there, the next day, he puts on his shorts, the boyfriend, and goes for a swim. And leaves his cell phone in the room. And she curiously takes the cell phone and realizes that it doesn't have any security for password. So she was able to open the cell phone. The first place she went was the gallery of pictures. And as she's seeing those pictures, she gets shocked when she realizes that he was going out with the other co-workers of her in the pharmacy at the same time that he's going out with her. And from thinking that she's in the top of the world, now she felt horrible. So she took one of her bottles of pills and attempted to commit suicide. Good thing the boyfriend found her. Very soon, immediately after that, she was taken to the hospital. They removed the medication from her system, and later in the evening sent her back to the hotel. When she got back to the hotel and she realized that she was together with this boy, she said, you know what, my life is over. And took another one of her bottles of pills, and this one had a nasty effect of lowering the blood pressure. So now her blood pressure is crashing down, the kidneys are failing, becomes a nightmare there for the physician taking care of that case. And when the boyfriend sees what he just caused, he left her by herself down in Mexico. And I'll tell you the rest of the story at the end. So when we have issues with depression, there is a problem at the level of the communication of the cells. And studies are very clear that when somebody is having low activity of the frontal lobes of the brain, that's what causes the depression. So what we have done, we wrote a whole article. You can get this article there from that ResearchGate page that I've been telling you. Just Google the Netley hit hypothesis, and you'll be able to find this full article. So basically, in this article, we are explaining the main idea of how we treat patients with depression. And basically, the way that we wrote this article, we went and looked for major studies that show what are things that have been documented as causes of depression. And then what we did, we put those causes together. We found more than 100 different causes of depression. And we took those 100 plus causes and we made 10 groups out of those 100 causes. And this is our main hypothesis. So it is our hypothesis that somebody is going to develop depression and or anxiety if from this list of 10, they have 4 or more. So let's just go briefly through each one of these 10 hits. By the way, in the book Pandemic Busters, I have a whole chapter here about this. So when you get your book, you should be able to also read some on this. So you have the genetic factor. It will qualify as genetic factor if the person has a relative, close relative that is suffering depression and or anxiety, or close relative that attempted or committed suicide. Any of these factors would qualify for that genetic factor. Number 2, developmental factor. It will qualify for developmental factor if the person had any form of abuse when they were small, that would qualify for that factor. If the person didn't grow up with both biological parents at their home, that would qualify for that factor. If it's a female and had their first menstrual period before the age of 11, that would qualify for that factor. And if this person was eating a very junk food type of diet earlier in their life, any of those factors would qualify for this developmental factor. Now, this is the good news, bad news. The bad news is that these 2 factors you cannot change. It's things that are in the past. But the good news is that you need 4 or more in order to have depression. In other words, you can have both of these. That doesn't mean that you're destined to have depression for the rest of your life. Next one is lifestyle. So let's go and see the ones that you can change. It will qualify for lifestyle if you don't have a regular exercise program, if you are not breathing fresh air on a regular basis, you're spending too much time inside of buildings, or if you are not being exposed to bright light on a regular basis. Any of these 3 factors would qualify for the lifestyle factor. Can you change these 3 things? Yes or no? Yes, those things are reversible. Next one, circadian rhythm. You will qualify for circadian rhythm if the person has insomnia on a regular basis, if the person doesn't have order in their lives. They're eating at all times throughout the day. They don't have regular times to eat, stop eating, and then eat again on a regular basis. Any of these factors would qualify for that circadian rhythm. Next one is the factor of addictions. It will qualify for addictions if the person is dealing with any addictive type of behavior, from use of illegal drugs, but also use of certain legal drugs, such as benzodiazepines, such as opioids, or if they're using any form of tobacco, alcohol, caffeine, any of those factors would qualify for the addiction factor. Question, can you overcome addictions? Yes or no? Yes, it's possible to overcome addictions. Next one, nutrition. And this one, as I mentioned to you, makes all the sense in the world. What we eat will have an effect at the level of the brain. It will qualify as the nutrition factor if the person is eating too much junk food, if the person is eating too many animal foods, if the person is not eating certain key nutrients like tryptophan, omega-3, folate, iron, vitamin B6, calcium. These things I need to eat from my diet, and if I don't eat those key foods, my brain cannot make the right neurochemistry. And this is another factor that we can change. We can change the way we eat. Next one, toxin factor. We qualify as a toxic factor if you are being exposed to mercury. And number one source of mercury happens to be the consumption of fish, or exposure to lead or to cadmium. You're going to be exposed to cadmium if you work in a factory, like the factories of batteries. They use cadmium, and you can be potentially exposed to that. Next one is 3 factors in one. So number one, you don't belong to a social network on a regular basis. You know, if you don't belong to a club or a church or something that meets on a regular basis, that will qualify for that. Complicated stress. You are under a tremendous amount of stress day in and day out, bad relationship, difficult working situation, and so forth. Any of those factors would qualify for the stress factor. And or any of these 3, you lost something very important for you and you have not been able to overcome that loss. Be it a job, being a part of your body, be it a loved one, an object, something very special for you, and you've not been able to overcome that, that will qualify for that 8 factor. And then number 9, this one is the exception of the rule. We said that you needed 4 or more of these factors at the same time. Well, this one by itself can trigger depression or anxiety. So medical conditions such as cancer, medical conditions like a diabetes that is not well controlled, an autoimmune condition, many forms of viral diseases, diseases that affect the kidneys, diseases that affect the liver, any of these factors, you need a competent health professional to stabilize things. And the most common type of medical condition, hormonal problems, specifically thyroid, which happens to be a problem that many people face. You have to stabilize that problem if you want to overcome the depression. And finally, the frontal lobes hit. So in the brain, the place where depression lies happens to be the frontal lobes of the brain, which is exactly above your eyes. That part of your brain is where the frontal lobes are located. And it will qualify for frontal lobe problem 2 things. Either you're not doing enough things to stimulate that frontal lobe, and or you are doing things that suppress the function of the frontal lobe. Things like what? Well, for example, your conscience is located in your frontal lobes. If you're doing things that go against your conscience, you are going to be suppressing that frontal lobe, and that's going to have a negative effect. So that's what our program focuses on. It focuses at identifying those causes of depression and working actively to reverse those actively present causes. In that way, the patients are able to overcome the problem. So let me finish the story of Mikala. Remember? We left her in the hospital there. The boyfriend left her by herself. And what ended up happening, a relative of her had mercy, so she flew from America to be with her in the hospital for the next few days that she was there. And when she was able to leave the hospital, she knew about a program in California. So she took Mikala to our program. And when she got there, Mikala was angry. Mikala was still thinking about suicide. Mikala was not happy at all. And what we did, we ran this test. We started to try to identify the causes of depression that Mikala had. So what we did, once we identified those causes of depression, we started working at reversing those causes. We gave her hydrotherapy, we gave her music therapy, lots of exercise, plant-based diet, cognitive behavioral therapy, dealing with her anger and this type of things. And she was able, in a few days, to show that her problem could improve, and her smile came back after a long time. And she told us that she had not felt so good in a really long time. So what did we do? We started dealing with the root causes of her problem. So that's the key of this depression program. You deal with the root causes of the problem. So one of the places I was living in California was very close to this bridge. What's the name of this bridge? The Golden Gate Bridge. This bridge is so big that when they're painting this bridge, by the time they finish painting it, the first painting is too old. So they're constantly working on this bridge. Sadly, this bridge doesn't have a protection against suicide. And many people come here, they stop their car or walk in there, and they jump all the way there. It's a long ways down there. So, believe it or not, there are a few people that survive that jump. So a researcher went and found those people that survived that jump. And he went and asked him some very interesting questions. The first question that he asked them was, number one, would you want to commit suicide? Yes or no? What was the answer? Yes, I wanted to commit suicide. Second question, are you glad that you were not able to finish your suicide attempt? What was the answer? Yes, I'm very happy that I couldn't complete my suicide attempt. So the researcher said, wait a minute. First you're telling me that you wanted to commit suicide. Now you're telling me that you're happy that you didn't finalize that suicide attempt. When did you change your mind? That's a really good question, isn't it? At what point did you change your mind? What was the answer? As soon as my feet left solid ground, I realized I had made the biggest mistake in my life. The issue is that depression increases impulsivity. And the person ends up saying or doing things that they later on regret. They go to the store with their credit card and they're buying all kinds of things. And not until the end of the month when the bill comes, they're like, why did I bought those things? I didn't even needed those things. And it's because depression increases impulsivity. And that's why we need to teach people resilient. Let me show you here a little clip of one of these people that survived that jump on the Golden Gate Bridge.
You say the demon in your head said, all right, now's the time to jump, do it.
Yeah.
What was your next memory?
Feeling like shards of glass were piercing my skin as I fell, because the fog just turns to icicles. When you find yourself in excruciating physical pain, what's the one thing you want that pain to do?
Go away.
And when you're in so much pain that you can't breathe, you believe you have to go. If we can teach people how to be resilient in the face of pain, how to cope with the pain, and how to survive the pain, a lot more of us could stay here, inside the pain. I want to help people recognize their value, that they are worthy, and that suicide is never the solution to their problem. It is the problem.
So as you can see, there is definite hope for mental health problems. The same way as the cholesterol principle that we were learning, we can either deal with the water in the floor, or we can go to the source of the problem, reverse it, and that's the beauty of lifestyle medicine, that is able to address these things and is able to reverse the problem. There's more than 8,000 people that have gone through our depression program, and I can tell you, story after story after story, just like Mikala, today, she doesn't take a single psychiatric medication, and she is completely depression-free. So may God bless you. May you experience these changes in your life, and may your life continue to improve physically, mentally, and spiritually. Thank you very much.